Yes, welcome back, friends. As a continuation of conditions and warranties, we shall look into what is meant by express conditions and its related topics, and later on implied conditions and its related topics. First and foremost, what is meant by express conditions and implied conditions? Before that, conditions, as we already covered in our previous session, means it is the primary aspect of the contract. If the primary aspect of the contract is breached, if it is non-performed, then we already have known that it gives the right to the buyer to repudiate the contract as well as claim damages. So, getting into the point of what is meant by express slash implied conditions, first and foremost, let me explain what is express conditions. It's simple. Express conditions are those conditions, those points which is exclusively given in the contract by word written or oral. So whenever the contract has expressly provided that in the agreement or in the contract, then we say it as express conditions. And what is implied conditions? Implied conditions are those conditions which are presumed by the law that it should be existing if and when the contract of sale gets executed. So what is express conditions? Express conditions are those which is already provided for or mentioned in the agreement slash contract. However, when it comes to implied conditions are those conditions which are presumed by the law that it should exist. Please note that by way of an express condition, there can be a waiver of implied condition. What do you mean by this? By exclusively entering into a written form of a contract, certain implied conditions can be waived off, can be given up. Then in such cases, express conditions prevails over implied conditions to the extent which is waived off. Am I clear, my dear friends? Let's see what are the various express conditions or implied conditions. Express conditions, as I've already told you, is which is already provided in the contract by way of writing. Implied conditions are those which are presumed by the law. Now, what are those implied conditions which is presumed by law? One by one we shall discuss. First one, condition as to title of the goods. That means condition about the ownership of the goods. Means the right to sell the goods when property is to pass on. The law presumes that you are the owner of the goods, therefore you are able to pass on the property. If that title itself is questionable, if that title itself is fake, if that title itself is not valid, then implied condition says the contract itself can be avoided. Reason, without being an owner, without having the property, the general property, you cannot transfer titles to another person. So the first point says condition as to title of the goods. It means a right to sell. When do you get the right to sell? Only if you are the owner of the goods, you get the right to sell the goods and pass on the property. Next, in case title is defective, that means if and when the title is defective, then the buyer needs to return back the goods to the true owner. Please recall sale versus agreement to sell explanation, where if the owner of the goods he gets involved in a contract, and later on if there is a possibility that the third party to the contract has taken over the goods, then the owner can recover back the goods from the third party. That's what precisely I meant by in case the title is defective, the buyer needs to return back the goods to the true owner and recover back the price from the seller. Now, what is this all about? I'll give you a situation where, for example, a bike which is stolen is sold by Mr. A to Mr. B. Please mark this point. A does not have titles to the goods because he is a thief. He's stolen the bike from one person and sold the bike to another person, let's say B. Assume that for this example, Mr. C is the owner. Though Mr. A has sold the goods to Mr. B, that is the bike to Mr. B, and Mr. B has paid the money to Mr. A, if C comes, who is the true owner of the bike, he can take back the bike from Mr. B. Now, what is B stand here? B at the best can recover the price from Mr. A. That's exactly what I have mentioned here. In case the title is defective, the buyer needs to return back the goods. In this case, B has to return back the goods to Mr. C, who is the true owner, and recover back the price from the seller. That is, B can recover back the money from Mr. A. Because, mind you, the basic point was titles. A did not own any titles to the goods. He was not the owner of the bike, therefore he cannot sell it. Law presumes whenever you are selling that you have titles. If that is disturbed, then it is nothing but a breach of implied condition, which leads to repudiation of the contract and also gives rise to a claim of damages. The next one is sale by description. Description means describe. You are describing a product as to how it is. We have seen this in, let's say, a Flipkart or a Amazon. You have seen the description of the products by way of photos, by way of the text written as to how the product is, what is the description of the product, what are the characteristic features of the product. All this is described. Based on the description, if you have made a sale, then the implied conditions are so and so. Goods shall correspond to the description. What do you mean by this? If the sale has been effectuated by way of a description, then the real goods which is delivered to you should match with the description. That's what I meant. Goods shall correspond to the description. Next, if you contract to sell peas, you cannot compel the buyer to take beans. This is a very, very popular acronym which we use in contracts, which we use in teaching and understanding the subject. When you contract to sell peas, you cannot compel the buyer to take beans, as clear as possible. Therefore, the buyer is not bound to accept and pay for such goods. Where you have shown peas to be sold, then you are delivering beans, then obviously the buyer is not bound to accept beans and pay for it. Later on, the next point we see is important to check whether the description was essential for identifying the goods. This has a little bit of in-depthness involved, though the words were pretty simple. We have to check, please understand this point, important to check whether the description was essential for identifying the goods. What do you mean by this? Now, in every contract of sale where description gets involved, we need to see whether description was at all necessary. Why? I give certain examples. For example, Sheffield crockery or a Tetra Pak, it's by default understood that the characteristic features, the description related to those goods is already prefixed in the mind of the human. Sheffield crockery means what? By default, we understand this as spoons, forks, and certain utensils, crockeries. These are kitchenware items. So when you describe it as Sheffield crockery, you cannot sell bombs over there. You cannot sell electronic goods over there. So the description Sheffield crockery, when that was the description given during the contract of sale, it is by default understood that these are the products meant to be sold, even though if there was no pictorial representation. When we say Tetra Pak, we understand that it is a Tetra Pak where it is a closed circuit. You can store that particular product not under refrigerator. If you want, you can store it, but you need not store it under a refrigerator. For example, our milks which comes under Tetra Paks. When we say Tetra Pak, we need not have a physical representation shown to us that it is a Tetra Pak. Now, when I say Tetra Pak, by description, I cannot give a plastic cover pack to you and say it is a Tetra Pak. That's meant by description. So, if there is a sale by way of a description, it should fit to these things. Otherwise, it will definitely be treated as breach of implied condition. The next is sale by sample. This is pretty much enjoyable and pretty much understandable in a very easier way. I'm sure you would have seen in movies or even during the present scenarios, if you have gone to say a ration shop where a kirana store type shop where rice is kept in small bowls, and you are expected to check each and every bowl as to which quality of rice you want at various prices. So when there is a sale by when there is a sale by sample, you are showing one of the samples, that is, let's say a rice of, let's say, 55 kgs or 55 rupees per kg rice. That sample which you are showing to the customer, that is a buyer, it should correspond with what the seller delivers to the buyer. Let's say he is buying a 25 kgs bag of rice. The sample what is shown by the shopkeeper to the buyer should match with what has been shown and what has been delivered. Let's see what it is. Bulk goods should correspond with the samples shown. Second point, buyer shall have a reasonable opportunity of comparing the bulk with sample. Let's say there is a bag of rice which comes up to your house for delivery. You are having a reasonable opportunity to check whether the sample and the delivered product is the same. What do I mean by this? You can probably open the topmost part of the bag and check a few, let's take, you have taken rice like this, or raw rice like this, and compared it with the sample. This is called reasonable opportunity. We can't imagine our expectations to be so high that I open up the whole bag and unload the entire rice and check item by item or rice by rice. That becomes practically impossible. So a reasonable opportunity should be given for comparing the bulk with sample. So what if the reasonable opportunity was not given to compare? Then it's pretty simple. Then you can repudiate the contract. Going further, goods shall be free from any defect based on ordinary examination of the goods. So as a human being, when we ordinarily examine certain goods, we are capable of identifying whether there is any defect or not. Let's take, for example, there was a sofa which you wanted to buy. Let's say you have gone to the showroom. The reasonable examination that you do in the ordinary course of your life is basically to sit on the sofa and probably jump like this and check whether any sound or a noise is created out of it, just to check the durability of it. So goods shall be free from any defect. If by your ordinary examination it appears that there is a defect, you can straight away reject that and cancel the contract. But in case there was any inherent defect which you are not identified, there comes the issue about litigations. We shall discuss about such issues when we go to a topic called caveat emptor. As of now, sale by sample has these following points for your observation. Next comes sale by sample and description. Here, little bit of analysis is there. Please check this. Bulk goods which is getting delivered to you should correspond both with the sample as well as description. Let's say the bulk goods is corresponding only with the sample, but it is not corresponding with the description. Then you can obviously reject the goods and cancel the contract and claim damages. Vice versa is possible also. What do I mean by this? Goods is matching with the description but is not, that is, the bulk goods is matching with the description but it is not matching with the sample. In such scenario also, definitely you can repudiate the contract and claim damages. That is what I mentioned. In case of mismatch, then the buyer can cancel the contract, and we know the consequences of breach of implied conditions. Moving on further, condition as to quality and fitness. Important, because it's like a touch and go situation where it's not a straight jacket formula where this comes as a right. Let's see what it is. Ordinarily, this is not an implied condition is the first point. Please note, it is not an implied condition ordinarily. Then when does it become an ordinary condition, or when does it become implied condition? First one. However, there should be a reasonable fitness for a particular purpose if the buyer has made known his purpose of purchase. What do you mean by this? Is it confusing? No, sir, it is not at all confusing. It's simple. Ordinarily, quality and fitness is not an implied condition. Agreed. There should be a reasonable fitness means, let's say in the sofa example, as soon as you sit, the sofa breaks down, then there is no fitness at all. There is no quality involved in that. Later, we understand the concept of caveat emptor. I will connect this point, but coming back to this point, what is the important core topic here? The core topic is, if the buyer has made known to the seller the purpose of purchase, then comes the implied condition of quality and fitness. What do you mean by this? If the buyer, let's say, goes into the showroom and says, I do not know anything about any of this product or any of the characteristic features of this product, I rely upon your expertise. See this point further, the seller should have been ordinarily dealing with such goods. So if the buyer has conveyed to the seller that he is depending on the seller to decide or select the goods, then only the implied condition about quality and fitness comes into play. Here, these issues do not apply in case the goods are sold under trademark and patent is also another important point for your observation. That means if the buyer has conveyed his intention to purchase subject to the expert knowledge of the seller in his domain, in his field, then yes, quality and fitness implied condition will get attracted. However, when such products are sold by way of a trademark or a patent or a brand name, then it is by default understood that it is of a quality product, it is fit for human consumption or human usage. Therefore, where the product is about trademark related issue or a patent related issue, the topic of implied condition of quality and fitness do not operate. Last point under quality and fitness is about caveat emptor. I shall discuss more about caveat emptor in my next session, but just to connect a small point with this. Caveat emptor refers to a small topic referred to as let the buyer beware. Let the buyer beware means the buyer should know what he is going to purchase. So if the buyer knows what he is going to purchase, then the second point and the third point and the fourth point does not arise. So only when the buyer is unaware as to what he wants to buy, he conveys it to the seller and relies upon his expertise, thereby the concept of implied condition of quality and fitness comes into play. But having said that, you should also note the point that if the product is based on trademark and or patents, then the whole points of implied condition of quality and fitness does not arise. That is where caveat emptor is having a linking point with quality and fitness. In simple words, if the buyer is aware of what he is going to buy, then all these above points does not arise. If he is unaware, then he says to the buyer, or rather the buyer says to the seller that he is relying upon the seller who has his expert knowledge in the field of whatever he is selling, then implied condition about quality and fitness arises. Having said that, all this will get negated if the goods is related to something called trademark goods or patent goods. I hope this explanation was sufficient enough for you to understand what is meant by implied condition as to quality and fitness. Moving further, next is condition as to merchantability. What do you mean by merchantability? Of course, the definition, the word merchantability has not been defined anywhere in the Act of Sale of Goods Act 1930, but we infer from certain normal English language. Please understand this. Goods is of such quality as a man of ordinary prudence would accept it. Merchantability means saleability, basically, when the goods is of such a quality where a man of ordinary prudence means ordinary knowledge, is able to understand whether the goods is fit to be sold or fit to be purchased, then we call it as merchantable. If it is a broken product, then we cannot say it is a merchantable product. The intention of buying a particular product is not to buy a broken product, it is to buy a quality product, as we have already understood in quality and fitness. Therefore, the implied condition of merchantability, that is saleability, merchantability being defined as quality which can be checked by a man of ordinary prudence who has normal intelligence and normal thinking levels, whose mind is a rational thinking. Such person if he decides that this product is not fit for human consumption, then we say it is non-merchantable. If it is fit for human consumption, then we say it is merchantable. So it is one of the implied conditions, that is condition as to merchantability. The last one is, of course, in condition of merchantability, I have also given a concept of caveat emptor. Please recall what I said in the previous implied condition about quality and fitness, that caveat emptor works here also. Means what? If the buyer is aware of what he is going to buy, then there is no such problems. But if he is not aware, only then he relies upon the expert knowledge of the seller. So even if the condition as to merchantability has to work, it has to be in conjunction with rule of caveat emptor. That means if the buyer is not aware of what he is going to buy, then he should rely upon the seller by conveying it to the seller. If he is not done that, then buyer is at fault, not the seller. In other words, the implied conditions won't operate. The last one, rule or condition as to wholesomeness. This is nothing but an extension of marketability only. When the product is related to eatables or provisions, then we call it as condition as to condition as to wholesomeness. The same points what I explained for condition as to merchantability equally applies to condition as to wholesomeness. The only additional point that you have to keep in mind is, if it is condition as to wholesomeness, it should be related to eatable products or it should be related to provisions. I hope all the implied conditions are clearly understood by you. If you have any doubts about a particular issue, you can always mail me back at lloydsacademy@gmail.com. I will revert back to you. Thank you.